And welcome to another edition of Nurse Practitioner Television. This is attorney and nurse practitioner welcoming you to our show, and happy Nurses Year. Unfortunately, we are facing a lot of trials and tribulations with the COVID-19 virus, and we're here to further illuminate all my nursing brothers and sisters about employment law and about your rights and about wearing PPE. Now remember, this does not constitute legal advice for your particular state. We're talking about federal general law. We're talking about harassment in the workplace and retaliation. And who better than a good friend of mine and colleague that we've practiced for nearly 20 years together, and he's a federal employment law attorney, Robert J. Heil. Welcome, Robert. How are you?
Doing great, Joe. How are you doing today?
Well, Robert, I want to tell you that I'm very grateful that you're here. I know that a lot of nurses and physicians, as well as other healthcare providers that we're extremely grateful for what they're doing, need guidance on general employment law principles. Now, as you were telling me off camera, PPE and all those other things, they're just starting. This is new law. This is a new area. So I'm going to ask you about those labor law general principles. So let's jump in feet first. Tell us a little bit about your education, training, and background as it pertains to employment law.
Sure. Well, I'm local here. I grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas. Went to Windsor Park Elementary, Baker Middle School, finished up at Ray High School in 1994. After that, I was passionate about the law. I loved doing mock trial when I was in middle school with Miss Nelson. And so I ended up at University of Texas studying pre-law. Went to South Texas College of Law and learned a lot about the employment law and became very passionate about helping people, fighting for justice. And so during that time at South Texas, I took an interest, and now I'm focusing on that, helping people in the community and really fighting for those people, nurses, doctors, and people who need that kind of help. And so it's a privilege to be here today on the show, and a privilege to be able to inform and help people who may need this in this new era, this new frontier that we're facing with COVID and the dynamic changing situation with employment law.
Well, I thought I'd bring you on because I know how passionate you are about helping nurses, about helping doctors and nurse practitioners. You've been in the battlefield with me in the courtrooms because of your expertise. I've handled the regulatory, you've handled the employment law, so I'm glad you're here. And I really am grateful that you took the time to be here for us. For these nurses that I'm loading it up to social media platforms all over, from nurses who play cards, that's a big one. The ER nurses, we've got all of these nurse practitioners that are out there, and other LPNs, or also known as LVNs here. So we're reaching a broad audience, and plus I'm going to load it up to COVID healthcare workers so they'll know. So let's talk about the general principles of law. If you're a healthcare worker working in an environment, often they say, well, I'm at will, they can run me off. Even if I'm in a union, I'm facing retaliation if I make too big of a stink. So let's jump into that feet first. If a nurse sees something that is unlawful, if a doctor or a healthcare provider sees something that is affecting patient care and that is a danger, what is your take on that? What can they do?
The biggest ammunition, the biggest weapon that the nurses may have are the laws that protect them. The biggest organization that I think is effective in protecting people's rights on these areas of safety, discrimination, is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So I would say and encourage all nurses who are facing issues of discrimination, safety, retaliation, hostile work environment, that they should engage those processes that the EEOC offers. There's local offices throughout the state of Texas, and we can reach out to them in San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, McAllen, and also in Austin. We have a local EEOC TWC office that is very effective at processing those issues. And so any complaints are going to be specific and unique to that particular situation. But I would encourage the nurses to invoke those protections of the EEOC, engage everything in that process so that they could seek a resolution.
And each state has their own EEOC office.
Right. It's a federal program, and it's protected by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There's also protections for disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Anybody over the age of 40 is protected for the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. And then we have various forms of retaliation, kind of like what you're talking about. Anybody who is reporting unlawful conduct, unsafe practices, they're being retaliated against for any of those discriminatory reasons, they can invoke the retaliation protections through the EEOC as well.
Well, let's use a concrete example. We'll use a hypothetical 36-year-old RN clocks in, and they say you will be taking care of COVID-19 patients, and we are short on masks. If you have your own mask, use it, or we can give you a very basic mask that housekeepers or anybody else uses that are in direct contact. The nurse finds out that they're working with intubated patients. The nurse finds out that there will be a lot of aerosolization in the air of COVID-19, that she may be exposed and take it home to her family. So let's use that analysis because this is a frequently asked question. What's going through your mind on the general legal issues that this nurse is facing if she refuses to go into that assignment?
Well, I think you're right. That PPE issue, the personal protective equipment, that issue is very hot right now. And like I said, we're in a new frontier, a new area of addressing this legally. So there aren't a lot of cases, there's not a lot of precedent that addresses that. I would say this to nurses who are faced with this kind of dilemma. There's a need to treat the patients. We need these workers on the front lines. They're very brave and courageous for fighting these battles, helping people, putting themselves and their families at risk. But I would say to those workers that the front line, the forefront of protection for the worker's safety, the nurse's safety, the doctor's safety, is the doctor or the nurse themselves. So I would encourage them to use their own personal judgment, their personal clinical training, the knowledge they have about PPE, and there's no limitation on what they can do to protect themselves. So you want to make sure that you've got gloves, masks, visors, anything that you think would enhance and protect yourself in there, because you are.
But they don't have it. There's a global shortage. So they're giving them substandard PPE. So what can they do? Do they document it to the HR? Do they tell their supervisor? Just like any other employment law issue where they may be exposed to danger, what could they do, general principles?
Do the best you can with what you've got, but for the legal side of it, the legal protections, you need to document everything. For the purpose of presenting this to the EEOC, you need effective documentation to HR. I know that a very powerful law that protects nurses and patients is the Safe Harbor Act. So if you know of a risk to yourself, which I believe a contamination between a patient and a nurse would qualify,
yes,
then it's very strong and effective to invoke a Safe Harbor protection, put that in writing, and any deficiencies in equipment or risks that are being created for the patient or the nurse, I would strongly encourage them to document a Safe Harbor and do not put yourself at risk. If you cannot ensure your safety, then you shouldn't be providing treatment for those patients. You should file a Safe Harbor. You should file a complaint with HR and cite and document those deficiencies to protect yourself and to document the situation.
And what if, even after all of that, their supervisor threatens them, and this has happened, and I'm hearing it on Facebook and other media platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter, that they are being retaliated against by being sent home, fired, or even worse yet, reported to their respective state board? What would be their recourse with an employment law lawyer like yourself in their state?
That's where the laws come in, and you have very strong laws that protect on that type of retaliation. As many nurses know, if you file a Safe Harbor complaint, any retaliation that occurs after that is prohibited. It's against the law for them to retaliate. Just like an EEOC retaliation complaint, if you file that and you document it with HR, there's safety issues, that there's discrimination issues. If they retaliate against you for doing that, then they've committed a retaliation violation of which you could pursue an EEO case or pursue a lawsuit against them once you've exhausted those administrative remedies. So I would encourage you to invoke those protections, document, protect yourself first, but then document and then seek the retaliation statutes under Safe Harbor, under EEOC, under whistleblower statutes, so that you can protect yourself legally after you've protected yourself medically and clinically.
And if the person, just last minute here that we're wrapping up, but if a person is white, if the person is under 40 and says, well, Mr. Heil, I mean, that's all well and good, but does the EEOC apply to me as a white female under 40?
Of course, yeah, you have reverse discrimination statutes. So there's all sorts of protected classes here. It could be based on your race, it could be based on your religion, it could be based on your age, it could be based on your disability. So people who have COVID who are being treated differently as a temporary disability may be afforded protection under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So any race, gender, national origin, religion, disability, or age could be protected. And it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic. If they're treating you differently because one of those protected classes are in play, then you're afforded protection under the EEOC.
Robert J. Heil III, attorney at law, my good friend from South Texas College of Law, and also a guy who's been fighting for justice for not only nurses, but physicians and all healthcare workers. I want to thank you for coming on Nurse Practitioner Television.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Joe, and I hope that the information will be helpful to the nurses who are fighting on the front lines and the doctors who are fighting as well.
And I hope you come back and we talk about the Emergency Medical Leave Act, then how it applies to healthcare providers.
I'm available and willing to do that, and anything that we can do to disseminate good information and make it available so that the nurses and doctors have the power to act and protect themselves, happy to do, and it'll be our privilege to do that.
And Robert J. Heil, we want to thank you for coming on. And if you all have any federal questions that pertain to anywhere in the United States, federal law can be answered, and we'll route it to Mr. Heil. And you can send it to joe@flotuslawfirm.com. That's joe@flotuslawfirm.com. Or this is your office here, 361-887-8670. To all my brothers and sisters, if we can't help you in your state, we know who will. So thank you all, and God bless.